Hi, this is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. Well, recently I watched a video from Dr. Mike over at RP Strength, and he was talking about RFK Jr.'s remarks dealing with health and nutrition. And I found it fascinating, not so much in what his critique was, but in the bigger picture as far as the problems that many of us are going to have as far as having real health discussions that are going to make America healthy again. And let's take a look at some of the different remarks that Dr. Mike made that, and I like Dr. Mike's stuff for the most part. He is kind of snarky and he's a lot of fun. He also has some very good tips as far as, health, exercise and stuff like that. But in this particular situation, I think he was really off the mark, but I want to critique why he was off the mark. And one of the reasons why I think he run into a problem when it comes to making America healthy again is that the only tool that we bring to the table when we're making this discussion is a scale. RFK Jr. started off by saying, hey, look, we've got a situation where 70% of America is overweight or obese, which is true, but that's not the only marker of our poor health. It is a marker. But the problem is that only 8% of America is metabolically healthy. And that's a bigger problem than anything else. And there's 5 markers of metabolic health. One of them is your waist circumference. If it's over 44 inches for a guy, you got a problem. You got too much visceral fat. If your blood pressure is high, you got a problem. If your HDL cholesterol is too high, you got a problem. If your triglycerides are too high, you got a problem. And if your blood glucose is too high, you got a problem. These are all areas of markers of metabolic health. And when these are out of whack, when you've got one or more of these out of whack, this is what creates the situation where we have chronic disease. And almost everybody in this country is suffering from some form of chronic disease, 80 to 90% of the cases of which could be changed by changing diet and lifestyle. We could solve a whole host of diseases like type 2 diabetes, inflammation, arthritis, irritable bowel syndrome, and other stuff by just changing the diet. And unfortunately, what we're doing is throwing more and more pharmaceutical drugs and trying to take care of the symptoms, but not taking care of the root cause. So RFK brought up several different things that have gone into the diet that have created, some of which related to our overall health, but Dr. Mike only looked at it in terms of, does this affect weight or not? And one of them was high fructose corn syrup. And Dr. Mike said, hey, look, it's a sugar molecule, and it's not that big a deal. Well, actually it is. I mean, it is a highly subsidized product that is absorbed differently than most sugars are concerned. It's absorbed in the upper GI, which means that sugar, that particular form of sugar, quickly gets into the bloodstream and spikes the insulin level, which creates the inflammation that is creating some of the metabolic problems. And when you look at the amount of type 2 diabetes that has started to happen in this country, now that we've gotten more and more of our soft drinks are tainted with high fructose corn syrup, heavily subsidized by our tax dollars, we're starting to see an increase in the amount of type 2 diabetes. And, it may or may not have all that great of an effect on weight, but as far as our overall metabolic health, it is certainly having an effect. And this is kind of the problem when you kind of look at it. The only tool you've got to look at is the scale. Yeah, one form of sugar is going to probably relate to your weight the same way, but your body and the way it metabolizes things are very, very different. Same thing applied, he went after RFK for saying that industrial seed oils, otherwise known as vegetable oils, are not good and they're part of the dietary thing. And there's no link that I know of between eating a diet with a predominant base of vegetable seed oils as opposed to saturated fats that show any change in weight. I mean, fat molecules are fat molecules, and they're going to, if you go with strictly a calorie in, calorie out model, they count the same and they're going to have the same effect on your weight. The problem is that there are different effects on the metabolism. And there seems to be a cutoff point where if you have too much of the omega-3 rich oils, the industrial seed oils, you're creating an inflammatory marker. And Dr. Mike said, hey, there's no link, there's no studies that show that this relates to weight gain. But there is one that shows that it does increase mortality. And that's the Minnesota Coronary Heart Study. This was an interesting study that was done back in the 70s where they did a randomized control study where they put one group on, at that time, standard American high saturated fat diet. They had whole milk, butter, real meat. They used lard and tallow. And the other group, they used margarine, skim milk, and vegetable oils. Compared the two groups. And the idea of the study was to show that the people that were eating the high saturated fat diet were going to have an increased rate of heart attacks. Didn't happen. The heart attack difference was negligible. The difference was in the group that got the vegetable seed oils and the margarine and the skim milk, they died. It increased mortality. All-cause mortality was significantly higher in the people that were getting the vegetable seed oils. And one of the reasons why that people have hypothesized on, though it was not tested for, was the amount of linoleic acid, and it's highly inflammatory. And this is kind of the problem. It's never been tested, as far as what is the effect of too much of linoleic acid in the system, and is there a dose dependency level? And hopefully this is one of the areas that RFK will be working on, is to actually test this hypothesis out with some good double-blind studies where we can actually take a look at it, because we can look at, okay, what have been the major changes in our diet in the last 100 years? We've increased the amount of sugar, we've increased the amount of ultra-processed food, and we've added in these vegetable seed oils, which is now making up the bulk of our calories. And since we've done that, there's been an explosion in obesity and chronic diseases that have never existed in the history of this planet. Yet we're not blaming the obvious changes. We're looking at we've done something else. And that to me is nonsense. I mean, it is just too obvious that we've made some significant changes in our overall diet. And to ignore that is to be, I think, frankly, stupid. So when you look at, when we're critiquing these things, you've got to realize that, there's no science that says this is resulting in that, because it hasn't been tested. And that's the problem more than anything else. We haven't taken a hard look at what effects different things are having. I mean, and then the other one was pesticides. Yes, there's no link between glyphosate and obesity, but there's a link between that glyphosate and different cancers. And that link keeps getting stronger all the time. I mean, American monocrop agriculture has resulted in less nutritious food, at an agreeably lower price point, but at what cost to our health? And that part is not being discussed. And as long as we keep this highly subsidized monocrop agriculture train going, we're going to start seeing more and more health problems like we're seeing now. And, just type 2 diabetes in and of itself, it's going to cost us close to $1 trillion each year just for the treatment of it. And we can't sustain that. We're not going to be able to sustain those costs. And if you know, based on studies, that this can be changed through diet and lifestyle, then it's really worth our while to begin that discussion without snarky comments. This is Kirk, the Bariatric Carnivore. I try to put out a couple messages each week. If you like this message, please hit like and subscribe and join this channel. I will talk to you again soon.